Okay, let's try to make stuff. Hopefully I don't screw it up. Let's make some food. Today we're making Spanish-style rice. Or I suppose specifically Puerto Rican-style rice. I mean, that's what my family heritage is, and that's where I learned to make it. I don't know what the differences are between different cultures in terms of the rice they make, but I know how to make this kind. So, let's get all of our stuff together. First and foremost, we have the most important ingredient in rice, florecitas, tiny, floret-shaped cookies. Now, of course, it's rice. Rice, very important in making rice. As with any self-respecting Hispanic American household, we keep our rice in a cookie tin. This makes the rice easy to access with a scoop, and also seals to keep any moisture out. Most go with the Danish butter cookie tin. Ah, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I'm pretty sure this tin is older than me. But we go for the Florecitas because it's a little bit larger. Gives you a little bit extra space for your rice. Now, specifically, here is the rice that I use. I'm honestly not sure what the differences are between the different kinds of rice because this is the only rice I have ever known my entire life. It's all we've ever used for any rice application. Made by Goya. We have olives. I am going to be including olives in my rice. You can, you cannot, and there's a whole bunch of other things you could put in. We'll get to that when we put the olives in. Now, my grandmother back in the day, after she would cook anything, she would take all the oil and pour it into a coffee can, which she would keep. And she would use that oil rather than regular oil in her rice to help with the flavor. A lot of people don't do that nowadays. So what we're going to do to flavor our rice is we are going to use a blend of different seasonings. Now, a lot of these can be found at any supermarket, either among the spices or among the ethnic food section. A lot of them are made by Goya, so they're very commonly found. Locally, we have a supermarket that is called Fresh Market. It used to be called Associated, and it is, I think, Dominican owned. So that's where we find a lot of the stuff that we need to make any kind of Hispanic food. So let's see specifically what we've got. We have these Bullion cubes made by Knorr, which formerly used to be branded as Lipton. Given that these are the Knorr brand, these should hopefully be able to be found at any supermarket, not necessarily a special one or in the ethnic food section. We've got cilantro, we have the ajo or garlic, and we have our onion, cebolla. Now you may be wondering, why do we have a bowl? You're probably also wondering why it's so dirty. Second question first. I already made a batch of rice, but why do I have a bowl? Well, I'm not particularly in favor of the idea of mise en place, which is something that they taught us in cooking class. It's not for that. It's a matter of I like to mix all of the spices together, kind of break them up, so that rather than spending all the time to add each individual one, which can cause the first ones that we introduce to be burnt. You'll see that when we add our seasonings in later. Now, it's for that exact same reason that I like to take a knife and cut up any of the bouillon cubes that we have, which, if you can't tell, having a little bit of trouble doing that with one hand, given that the other hand is holding the camera, but I'll get there at some point. But yeah, breaking it up so that it's already broken up, it all goes in all together, and I don't have to worry about having that big cube, a big solid chunk of seasoning that's not going to break up and spread everywhere. Or that I have to worry about breaking it up with the spoon, which always means that it's going to get stuck to the spoon. There. Not totally broken up, but it's better than it was. Now for the spices that I don't have to stab with a knife. First of all, we have Sason accent, which is generally pretty easy to find. Now we have our Sason Goya. Now there is a wide variety of Sasons. This is con Azafran, which is apparently Mexican saffron. I don't know what the difference between Mexican saffron and the other kind is, but I know that generally saffron is very, very rare. There are so many differences with stuff, without stuff. You can mix and match them. A lot of these seasonings have the Spanish terms for what's in them, so you might have to check to figure out exactly what it is that you're getting. For instance, our next spice is Sason Goya con Culantro y Achiote, or as it says below, which is coriander and annatto. Now you can see the blend of seasonings. That's what's going to give us that nice, rich yellow flavor. Yeah, color. Yellow isn't the flavor. But this is the basis for a lot of the nice flavors we're going to get. Jamon, also known in English as ham. Now I've got two different packs here. Usually we go with the Goya one, which is the packages of seasoning, but at one point we couldn't find that, so we have these Bullion cubes. So here's another cube, this one made by Knorr. You could use either one, whichever one is more available to you. This time I actually don't have any packages on me. This is the Knorr Bullion cube Caldo de Pollo. Oh, Caldo con Sabor de Pollo. It's chicken. It's chicken bouillon. Now, with the Sasons, you might be looking at what I have here, and you might be saying, there's a lot of overlap in what these different spices do, and it's true, but, you go through, you look at what you got in your spice aisle, and you pick what you like. That's how we got the bouillon cubes, which originally weren't part of this recipe, but they sounded interesting and they tasted good. Gave it a little bit of extra flavor, so mix and match what spice blend you like. Now, these, the chicken and the ham, of course, are bouillon cubes, so let me break those up as well. Our cookware. We have a caldero, very important to making Spanish-style rice. It's a small stock pot, fully made out of metal, a rather shallow pot. I mean, you can see the depth just looking at how my hand measures up to it. We're going to need a metal spoon to deal with this. This isn't going to work well with any other kind of spoon. You can generally find one of these anywhere that you can find cookware, especially if you have a place that sells Hispanic goods. Sofrito. This is something that a lot of people may not be familiar with. Sofrito is a base. A base is a highly concentrated bit of flavor that's used to flavor everything. This is the basis of our flavors. Wow. That does not look appealing, but I assure you it smells amazing. Sofrito is a mixture of a wide varieties of peppers, onions, spices. Perhaps sometime in the future I'll make a video showing how to make your own sofrito. You can buy it at the store, but it's really nice to make it homemade. The sofrito is where a lot of the flavor is going to come from. The flavor that doesn't come from all of those spices. And over here we have our oil. And, of course, adobo, because adobo is the base of all flavors. That is the third thing I've said is the base of all flavor today. But it's a very important spice to cooking just anything. We're using corn oil today. You can also use vegetable oil, and if you want a little bit more flavor, you could use olive oil. I once accidentally used olive oil. It came out very nice. Now let's get to cooking. First, we coat the bottom of the caldero in our oil, and we're going to let that heat up a little bit. Next, we bring in the sofrito, pour that in there. I just happen to have the amount that we needed already in that cup from having used half of it earlier with an earlier batch of rice. But when you're doing this on your own, it's generally going to be a scoop about the size of your metal spoon. So just dip the metal spoon in, take a spoonful out, and put that into the oil. Spread that out a little bit, let it just start to cook, start to brown before we add everything else in. I've got my spoon rest over here. I got my olives and my seasonings in their bowl. I got salt and pepper, of course, and my adobo. Now, the adobo and the salt and pepper, we're going to be using these to taste once we have a good idea of how the flavor is. Now is the point where you are going to smell the most amazing smell you've ever smelled in your life, as that mixture of herbs and spices and peppers begins to cook in that oil. And it's time for us to add to that mixture as we're going to bring in our spices. Now pour that bowl in. And again, this is why I did this, because you could put it in package by package, but kind of worry that all the stuff would start to burn. So we'll mix that in with our spoon, press that down to break up the little chunks that are in there, and get a bunch stuck to the spoon, just like I said. Yeah, that's why I like to cut them up a little better than I did beforehand, so I don't have to worry about this. Next, we put in our olives. Now, I'm using salad olives. Uh, Generally, you'll use your traditional manzanillas, your green Spanish olives. With the salad olives, I've always found that for some reason the pimento has much more of a strong red pepper taste. So I don't usually like to use it when I need to use olives. But in this application, it's going to get cooked. You're still going to get that nice salty olive taste. And the salad olives come already pre-chopped, so you don't have to worry about cutting them up. A lot of people just put in the olives, but then you just get these admittedly delicious big salt bombs. But if you do it this way, you can use a little bit less and make sure that everybody gets some olives. I'm going to use half the jar because the other half is going to go towards a pot of beans and potatoes later on. This is also the time where you would put anything else that you would like to put in your rice. People put gandules, people put ribs, people put chicken, any kind of meat you want, anything at all that you'd like to have floating in your rice. Now's the time to do it. In the other batch of rice, which I just made, and that's the reason why the bowl is dirty, I put gandules in there, but I really don't like gandules, so this batch is for me. Of course, this is the lid to the caldero. I probably should have shown that along with the other cookware, but it's there. We'll use that later. Right now, though, we need water. For this recipe, which will make us a caldero filled with rice, we're going to be using 6 cups of water. This is a 4-cup measuring cup, so I had to put in 1.5 of these. This is a quart. We'll pour it in very slowly, very carefully, of course. Anyone who's familiar with science knows to be careful when pouring water into a hot oil. I like my rice very wet, so I don't mind going over the tiniest bit. There's a little bit of tolerance, but not too much. Now we have the liquid for our rice. First and foremost, we're going to slosh it around a little bit. Scrape the bottom to make sure that none of the seasonings get stuck to the bottom. And now is the time to test it. Let's see how it tastes. This came out very olivey, as is to be expected, because all of the olive juice came out. I couldn't really avoid that doing this with one hand. I had to kind of pour it all out. So now we have our salt and our pepper and our adobo, and use your judgment. Blend them to see what tastes good to you. I myself am going to hit it with the adobo a little bit. It needs a little bit of a sharper flavor. That's better. It's definitely salty enough, so I don't think I'm going to need any salt, so I'm going to put just a bit of pepper into it. Mix it up a little bit, and very good. Now, once you have it where you want it, we're going to bring the heat up, get it to a boil, and then it's rice time. Oh yeah, we're getting there. We are getting there. Rice time, rice time. Okay, we have our rice here. So when you're making rice, it is twice as much water as there is rice. So we used 6 cups of water. We are going to use 3 cups of rice. To make it a heck of a lot easier, what we've done is we use a half cup, there it goes, a half cup, and put it in the rice. So 6 cups of water and 6 scoops of rice. Now, since I'm not actually counting out loud, I hope my count is right on this, because if not, I'm going to look like an idiot. There we go. And now the stirring begins. We're going to stir and scrape the bottom and ensure that no rice gets stuck to the bottom. Now, some people like rice that gets stuck to the bottom. My uncle doesn't actually eat rice. He only eats the stuff that gets stuck to the bottom of the rice, which is known as bigao. It's the burnt, stuck rice, and it's got a lot of flavor in it. I can see why a lot of people like it. It's usually crunchy, but I just can't handle that consistency. I can't do overcooked rice or pasta. It makes me gag. So we stir and we stir and we keep stirring to ensure that all the rice stays up in the water, and wait for it to fill up with water. Stir and stir, stir and stir. You might notice that all the rice that was on the spoon is no longer there. When you first put the spoon in, you make that first pass through after you poured the rice in. The rice isn't coated in all that oil and goodness yet, so it's really sticky and it's going to stick to the spoon. I just, while I wasn't recording, used my fingernail to get it all off. You could take a fork or a spoon or, whatever you want. Whatever it is, you can pour it back in so you get every single grain of rice. I, of course, didn't record myself doing that because I kind of needed both of my hands to do it. Now, you might be noticing now that every time I pass the spoon back, you see a lot of rice starting to come to the surface. That's because right now that rice is soaking in that water, and the ratio of rice to water is starting to change. It's going to be more rice, and it's going to be less water as we continue on. Slowly but surely, you're going to start to feel that resistance more and more, especially on these backswings. That's because now the ratio is going from a couple of granules of rice floating in liquid to being mostly rice with liquid around it. You can see that. You can see how much more is rice now. Once you have gotten to the point where it is about 3/4 rice, you can see that the rice is just below the surface of the water. It's really taking up most of the pot. I'd say that's a good amount right there. This took me about 6 minutes of stirring to get to this point. This is when it's time to move on to the next step. Now, my stove has a simmer burner in the back. So right now I'm going to turn on that simmer burner nice and low. Of course, at home, if you don't have one, you just put it on the back burner at a low temperature to simmer. Don't leave it on the front burner because everything's already very hot. That's why you want to put it on that fresh new burner that isn't heated up yet to make sure you don't overheat it. We are going to cover it, put it on that back burner, attempt to do it with one hand, succeed at doing it with one hand. Oh yeah, come get some. And we are going to leave that back there for 20 minutes. There's an old adage about rice, and it is that you do not play peekaboo with rice. The rice has to steam. We don't want any of that steam to escape, so for the next 20 minutes, we are going to just let it there, leave it alone, don't touch it, don't look at it, and come back in 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, and let's see what we got. Be careful of the steam as you open up, and know that there's going to be a lot of condensated water on the top, so just kind of let that hang over, shake it a little bit over the pot to get it back into the rice. It looks pretty good. All of the olives, anything you got is probably going to float to the top, so you're going to want to stir that around a little bit. You can really tell that there's still a lot of moisture in there. I can actually hear a loud popping noise as the moisture still boils in among the rice. Huh, I actually have some bigao on the bottom of the pan. So the rice is stuck on there pretty good. So if I can get all this rice off of the spoon, let's go get another spoon. It's time to try this out. Let's taste test what we got. Beautiful. Now I like my rice on the wetter, more mushier side. A lot of other people will like it more dry, as kind of individual dry grains. So for me, this is pretty perfect. It's really out of freaking focus. If I can get it to focus, you can see what it looks like. Come on. Come on. Okay, I give up. And I dropped a grain of rice. That's good enough. There we go. Puerto Rican rice in all of its glory. Look at that glory. I'm going to turn this off and put it in another container for use later. Futures. We successfully made stuff and didn't screw up all that bad.